Showtime. Great. Hey, Chris. Happy Tuesday and happy Halloween.
Yes, it's a spooky day today. Thank you for having me on, Igor.
Yeah,
Great
definitely.
to be here.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm obviously not always dressed in a chef's apron. It is Halloween. My wife and I picks out our group costume for myself, my son, my wife, and we did the Disney classic Ratatouille, and my son was the little rat on my shoulders.
Cool.
Hence the chef's outfit.
Yeah, I haven't got my Halloween costume, but I've got a background instead. So that's what I could bring today.
Yeah, it's all good. Well, Chris, thanks for being on. And welcome everyone back to another exciting episode where we chat about data topics. And today we're talking about the financial cost of bad data. We're going to go through a couple of just facts and statistics, go through a little bit of our own experiences, which I'm sure we have plenty of stories, some under NDA, some under not, and then from there we can talk about what people are doing and how this is being addressed in the market. But before we get to that, Chris is the co-founder of Light Data. I think I pronounce it Light. Is that one right?
Yeah, Light LEIT data. So yeah, I think we need to get to the bottom at some stage and agree on something. But any variation, as long as it's spelled correctly, that's all that matters, really. It's not bad data on its spelling, at least, anyway. Yeah, so a bit of intro about myself. Yeah, so as Igor mentioned, co-founder of Leap Data. We've been Snowflake partners for many years, specializing in trying to unlock the value from data, which is it's great because value has many ways of being delivered, and what can erode the value is bad data. And so it was great to come along and talk about one of my favorite topics for data.
Yeah, definitely. And if you don't follow Chris hosts his own podcast. Great listen. He'll have a good mutual friend JT on in a week, later this week, next week, and we will. That should be a great conversation. But for today, let's kick it off. And as a quick reminder, we will be sending out an email with resources. Anything that we talk about, mention here. Any reports, numbers, we'll try to include that in a follow-up email. So be on the lookout for that. Let's just kick it off with, we talk about financial costs of bad data. What does bad data mean? And where does it come from? And why does data go bad? Chris, you have your own 5-second summary of that?
Yeah, I mean, and the definition of bad data, and if I was to summarize up what that means, because everyone will always immediately think it's bad information within in a column of a table. I think it's any information that creates bad decisions. We can unpack what bad decisions are, and how you can actually evidence them, maybe. So yeah, that could be from missing data you don't have, the dark data. It could be data drift. So the data was okay at the point it was ingested, but over time, the rules that are there aren't tight enough to identify how it is no longer able to support the decisions it's required to do, because it no longer has the integrity that you expected it to have. So I like to refer to this thing a data quality firewall that's shifting left. The data world's always been where everything gets chucked at us, and we have to solve this problem of the bad data. But ideally, it's having that data correctly captured at the first place and preventing. But until then, we've got to be able to help clean evidence and then pass back that knowledge to the creators of that data, to how they can enforce rules to prevent it happening again.
Yeah, and something that you said earlier, I always like to harp on, which is bad data is data that is impacting something in the business, is causing some problems.
Yeah.
Data is also only useful to people when they're using it. Nobody thinks about data being bad if nobody's looking at the data. And so first and foremost, you're using the data to do something in the business, and you're making some decisions on it. You're making possibly forecasting decisions, sales decisions, marketing decisions. And then when the data is bad, obviously that decision becomes bad, and you don't know what you don't know. And I think that's really the crux of the problem is, as soon as you use data, the quality of it matters immediately.
Yeah, and I think the other thing you mentioned there is well, bad decisions. So data may be good enough for certain decisions, it may not be good enough for others. So there's a big talk of data contracts at the moment, and I support what they're looking to achieve. Definitely, it's definitely a change, as in thinking as a data product mindset in this market as well. But yeah, if we're able to have sorry, able to have those contracts that are able to define the use case for a particular contract for certain marketing activities, it's sufficient you just have the email address. Whereas for an outbound mail campaign, the full address is needed. So the quality of data was good enough for one use case, but wasn't good enough in that example. And there's other extremes of that. So yeah, I think understanding how data is being used in the organization is the key to understanding where that bad data is. I think that human in the loop feedback for us to identify that and have that ownership, because without the ownership, no one really cares. And I've been doing a lot of thinking around the term business value as research for a book I'm doing with Matt Housley. And the term business value is it's an evidentable positive impact on your business performance. And the reason why I say that is, okay, bad data affects your company performance, but understanding what you're trying to achieve as an organization needs to come from the CEO or from that C-level direction. If they're able to define what the strategies are, and then you're able to communicate with the business community there, you'll be able to establish where there's problems in achieving those goals, where data is part of that, but also where data quality is part of that. And I think you just said you don't know what you don't know. And with all the greatest tools in the world, it needs some business context to it, because you could be fixing, get the best, cleanest data in the world that no one even uses. There's no point in having that. No point hitting some metrics again. Yeah, we've just hit 99.9% quality checks on all of our data for addresses, but we don't even send any letters out anymore to these people. So maybe it wasn't worth the effort in getting that quality data, but it may be worth getting the effort in areas where there's high value in it. Your salespeople, giving them the best, hottest leads that have been refined and got the most up-to-date, accurate information of their customer lifecycle value, so you know who you're selling to, the right product to the right people at the right price. Having that information totally up to date and accurate can make your sales team 20 times more. Well, quoting something, but an amount more efficient, and you can work that out with evidencing that with looking at historical achievements with the old data set they had. Over time, you'll be able to prove and evidence the benefit of removing that bad data from that source.
Yeah. And I think you brought up a really good point. I make a lot of analogies between software engineering and data engineering, and how the evolutions are very similar. If you think about observability for data, observability for software, principles are very similar, but and the same concept applies in software. When I was at Uber, we had a lot of services. At some point, I love quoting this number, we had more microservices than people, than engineers on the team, which is completely insane. But that quality problem applied the same way. If you have a service that does a lot of retrying, if it's, let's say, dispatching rides, and if a ride drops off, it'll just get redispatched and another driver picks it up, and that's totally fine. A failure rate of 1% might be okay, because, we're doing a little redundant work, but that's not a problem. Business is still moving along. But a failure rate for background checks at 1%, those don't get, that's a very manual process. Someone has to go push a button. And so 1% failure rate might be really bad. And so that kind of brings me to that notion of you can't just buy a tool and put it in place and say, that's it. We're gonna have high quality data because we have a tool. It's a strategy. It's about understanding the business. It's about understanding where that data is used. Why is it important? And then working our way backwards from that.
Yeah, and I think getting that business buy-in to understand, why you're doing, the purpose of these initiatives, and a tick box exercise of I've just gone and bought this great product. There you go. It's going to solve all our problems. My job's done. And that centralized versus decentralized approach for governance is not going to work. Having what should be centralized is frameworks, ways of working, and then instilling that into each of the data product teams, if you're working that way, or your data engineering teams, for them to understand the impact of bad data, and not just to put in every single quality rule in just in the pipeline at every single step, because if you've already checked it once, you don't need to put it in every place. Understanding why you're doing it and having guidelines to how to do that. But the key thing is ownership, because there's no point finding all this. I love the fact that you said there's more microservices than people in a company, and it's probably the same thing. There's more tables in a data warehouse than there's in an organization in many places as well. Maybe that's the right number if you're a small company, but in a large organization of 50,000 people, you shouldn't expect to have 50,000 objects in your warehouse. In the same way, the microservices, it's that ability to be able to react, and if it's that granular to everyone's that customized, you haven't gone for a good approach of making a reusable assets, or data assets, I like to call them. I think the other thing you mentioned there that triggered some thoughts is the more and more people I speak to in the data world now, the more and more they're coming from engineering backgrounds, and it's great because what the engineering, every era from this data world brought something new to it and better ways of working. I think the data ops approach now is born from that DevOps approach there. I think observability that you brought up, which linked through to this as well, is it's been around for ages. I used to refer to as audit, logging, and monitoring. We've had this stuff for ages, but it just didn't make it a data world. Probably at the beginning it wasn't as needed as much because it wasn't that much for complex environment. But over time, that ecosystem has grown. It's fragmented. There's many different pieces to the puzzle now. It's meant that we've created a situation where we need to have an observability product. Right. But then often you think, do I need more than one observability product? Because what part of my platform are you observing? And I speak to a lot of vendors out there, and I don't think there's one product that can give you that complete 360 observability view of your platform, unless you're using Excel still. You've only got one piece of it.
Load up the Excel file and just look at it.
Exactly. Here you go. Full observability. Why is it running? Or I may have to go and check the CPU on the computer if I max it out in the memory or something. But it's the world's got more complicated now. And I think
and Chris, we have a question in the chat, and this actually this is very relevant to what we're talking about right now. About Martin is asking, do we have a favorite data quality maturity curve to share? And I think this is sort of what we're alluding to right now. You just mentioned, look, these tools have been around forever. For data, this might have not been necessary in the past. And I think that that's true to some degree. Data is growing at an exponential rate right now. Cloud data warehouses, all the ETL in the cloud, BI tools in the cloud, all of the data tooling is moving up to be more accessible and easier to use. And so maybe 30 years ago, when data scaled at the rate of people, this was okay. But now that data scaling at the rate of machines, this is impossible to manage. And so I think my mental model for a data quality maturity curve is it starts with, we don't have data quality, and everyone thinks that the data is good, but it's not. Then the second one is everyone realizes the data is bad, but we still don't do anything about it, and nobody trusts the data.
Yep.
And then from there, you typically build up to, all right, let's find the key data sets that people want to trust. Let's instrument those. Then let's have a platform to instrument it across the board. Let's build some processes on top of that for how things are going to be communicated and responded to. And then by the end of this journey, you get to a place where you now have the right systems and processes in place to actually manage your whole data stack. And that's kind of my mental model of that progression.
Yeah, and I think another thing that popped in mind is the hype cycle factor as well. So you know, when you, I think for the first time, I've said this a few times recently, I've seen in this data world that a hype cycle of generative AI has actually caused some real positive initiatives in organizations. And I think, you know, it's quite clear now, and you can quite easily see that, you know, if you play around with generative AI with bad data, you get bad results very quickly. And yeah, everyone knows about hallucinations and chat GPT. So it's a very easy conversation to have to a board level or a CEO that's going to sign off the budget for a particular project. Goes, oh, yeah, I want a data quality program now. Whereas it never probably used to get the same limelight and budgets as previous. So yeah, but to the point of when that problem's big enough for you, I think there's many factors. And the volume of data, I think you could probably go for the whole V's. You know, it's the variety, the volume, the velocity. There's probably certain points for different industries of what you're trying to achieve, of which ones of them are going to have to hit that tipping point of where you have to. I mean, I'd even go back further of saying it is there's no reason why we should be in this situation anyway. And if anyone's building anything from scratch, you know, I don't think if you're thinking you've got that bad enough problem to go and look at data, well, it should be data quality by design. So I'm going to put the ingest rules in there and a feedback loop to the business from day one. I want them to engage and give me the requirements, maybe in that data contract world of, right, I'm going to take this data. This is how you're expecting it. Every time it doesn't report to that, I'm going to let you know before you've even started analyzing it. You get that buy-in early enough, you know, you're going to get the right focus on fixing it before you've polluted your data lake and making it a data swamp, your data warehouse, making it a data lockup.
Whichever. The buy-in argument is actually an interesting one. So Michael here is calling out that the hardest thing for him has been getting upper management support, and they say no news is good news, right? And I think that's the one of the biggest challenges. And honestly, as leaders ourselves, Chris, I think you and I can empathize with this, because a lot of times it's, what does the business need right now to move faster, to generate more revenue, to grow? And oftentimes that's not data quality, that's ingest another source, do more marketing campaigns, get more leads. And then you start asking, are those good leads? Are we running campaign? Are we targeting the right people? And no news is good news is kind of that default of, we make the assumption that the team knows that something is going on. But having been a data engineer, I know that that's not the case. We're just swamped with requests, and you just kind of take it on the chin until you need to declare bankruptcy. And so I think part of this is knowing how to advocate for yourself and for your team back to management and say, look, we need to take a pause for 2 weeks, 3 weeks. We need to set some standards up. Otherwise, we're never going to get anywhere good. And that's how I've seen it from both sides of the coin.
Yeah. And again, been thinking a lot about this with regards to CEO tenure time. So the average time a CDO stays in the position before moving on, and the challenge that they're giving an organization, and the getting management buy-in. I think up until now we've been doing it wrong with regards to we're going in trying to get budget for a data quality project. We're going, right, we need this data quality project. And I think we should be focused on what the deliverable is, what a product mentality of it, where each time there's a small slice of that which is feeding through into the foundations that gradually build up what you need to put in place to be success. And I've got this whole view of competitive advantage and time to having that competitive advantage is your time to release value or business value. And if you're able to do that iteratively and not have to go and ask for it as a central, and it's selling the art of the possible to other teams in the organization. And if a data department is just seen as a cross-functional service that everyone uses a bit, it needs to be understood that data team that is there to make your business perform better with using data. And if they're seen as that, and you're able to sell that concept to the CFO or the CMO or then the CCO of how you've got an added value or help them achieve their goals as what they've been set by the CEO of increasing sales target, increasing loyalty of customers, decreasing costs, they're going to be less worried about what that budget line is. Is it for data quality? Again, we need data quality anyway. It's part of the design. It's like, can I go and build this house without putting the foundations? No. So I know I'm going to have to pay for the concrete to go in there. It becomes an understood element, and the more we can educate the C-suite on the impact of doing nothing. We can all do nothing. We can put our hand in the sand and no news is good news approach. I prefer the approach of actually having the balance of having some good news you can get out every quarter, some wins, and having those low hanging fruit, that you hate the term, but that you can use the examples of this is what we can achieve, with having that longer strategic view of keep leveling up those foundations, but making it the business give those requirements by highlighting the issues of the data that they're the owning or they're subscribing to.
Right. Well, let's talk specific numbers, right? C-suite loves numbers. Let's talk some specific numbers. I think that one of the most commonly quoted numbers is the Gartner report, where they mentioned $12.6 million annually lost to bad data. How they qualify that, I'm not sure. An IBM did a study in 2016. They estimated that, and this is a mind-boggling number, $3 trillion of GDP is lost due to bad data. I really want to dig into the assumptions here, but that's, even if it's half of that, even if they overestimated, that's still trillions of dollars annually lost to just issues with data. And this is not, part of this is purely effort, right? More people have to spend more time redoing the work. SnapLogic had a report, 82% of data analytics projects have to get redone because of data quality. And redone might mean remodeling, implementing the ETL pipelines, redoing the dashboards. And about 4 hours a week is lost due to resolving issues or preparing data for analytics per employee. And so a lot of this is just cost management. This is just good efficiency for the business. But it's not just that. It's also, data quality can also be a revenue center, right? Because everyone loves revenue centers and not just cost management. Forrester released a study that said revenue for companies could increase by about 10% just by, a 10% increase in data usage and accessibility would result in $65 million in additional income for a Fortune 1000 company, which seems great. But what's the biggest blocker to that? It's trusting the data. It's because 78% of marketers say, well, we have poor data quality and inconsistent customer data, and we can't really do much with this, so we're not going to use the data. We're going to trust our gut instead. And so having data quality, building that trust in the organization is going to lead to not just cost savings, but also revenue generation through new projects and through efficiencies. And so I think that these sorts of numbers, and as I said before, we'll send all these out, that is the sort of information that can be useful and build that mentality of data quality matters, not just for the sake of engineering, but for the sake of the business itself.
Yeah, and I love the But those numbers are mind blowing. I mean, I just love a small slice of that. That would do me. I'll make sure I do some good with it. But yeah, I think it's understanding. It'd be great to understand how they unpack those numbers or they work them out. But the stuff that I've been doing for this book, we use a term business value. And MIT did some reports and white papers of data monetization. I don't like the term data monetization because, well, one, they spell it differently in America to the UK, so it complicates things. And the other one, I think it generates the wrong immediate thought process because you're thinking just selling data, and it's not. And I think the three things that they refer to, and you mentioned two of them there, was you're selling data. And giving it to your customers, and they're not going to buy it if it's no good. So they're going to pay for it if it's fit for purpose, or they'll go somewhere else. The other one is business improvements, and I suppose it'd be great to understand improvements come in two ways: efficiencies of your data team and how they operate. That's that's something that probably has a lesser. I mean, it's probably easier to calculate because there's so many engineers out there. I don't think we should be worried because I'm sure we can spend that time doing something more beneficial than the activity we're doing because of that bad data. But the other one is where you're using it for business improvement, so business process optimization. And I think you mentioned earlier, but one of them is for example, onboarding a new customer, you lose clients at the data capture layer. That has an effect on it. But then taking clients on that don't pass KYC checks or anti-money laundering checks, and that can be way more costly from either way around. Actually, you're refusing people that could be good customers, or you're actually taking people on that actually were fraudulent. So being able to optimize your decisions and where you optimize your onboarding process needs good quality data. So there's going to be a value associated to that. I think you can also take that another level. So data itself is used to make decisions. So even algorithms that are out there, how they're used, they're trained on data sets that represent the hypotheses or the sample data you get at that time. If you're not able to identify that bad data or the bad data degradation, where it's starting to get worse in time, there's a point where that algorithm could have a negative impact where it actually costs you money. And there could be a negative impact of actually understanding the requirements about it. I'll give one real life example. I won't name companies, but a large fashion chain, e-commerce one, was fed up of all of the influencers buying their clothes and sending them back after using them. So they wanted to put a policy in that anyone that returns over 90% of all garments they've ever ordered immediately gets blocked. We don't want them as customer. That's great until the poor person that comes on the first time, buys one item, returns that one item because it was the wrong side, it was faulty. You're automatically, kicked off because you met the criteria of that. So and that's a bad decision because of bad implementation. But you think of an example of the algorithm not giving you the right response and it having a negative impact on your acquisition of new clients or on your sales you may targeted for high-end customers that deserve rewards.
And it's even scarier now because machine learning is a just big black box. You throw a bunch of data at it and it figures it out. And it's scary to consider the fact that if you just throw bad data at it, it'll make bad decisions and your business just blindly trusts something that this model is spitting out. And that can be pricing, that can be customer acquisition, that can be ads, whatever that is. But we talked a little bit about the cost. Let's talk about how deploying this. Right, this takes time. Fine, data quality is a problem. We can agree with that. How do we prevent it? And so JT here has a fun hypothetical. If data quality rules cost nothing, no cost to deploy, no operational overhead, no panacea, right? Wouldn't we want to deploy all the checks everywhere? Separately, known unknowns are way better than unknown unknowns. I generally think that this is mostly true. I agree. It's good to know about things that are happening. I think the biggest and this is half tip, half just theorizing. The biggest issue with data with checking everything all of the time is filtering it down to the things that actually matter. Example, at Bigeye, we're a small team. We're 40, a little bit over 40 folks. Our data warehouse is already hundreds of tables, maybe thousands if I can count all my third-party data sources. And so for us, if we deploy Bigeye on Bigeye data, which I know is a little meta, but it's a great dog fooding example. And when we deploy everything, we immediately realize that data behaves weird everywhere. All of the time, something is going to be weird. And the next step that we have to take is figure out what actually matters to us. It's that third step in that maturity curve I described as great. Start monitoring stuff, figure out what matters, narrow it down, build out the processes, then expand those back out. And I think it's important to make sure that deploying the monitoring and deploying the data quality rules is cheap and easy and efficient. But then that needs to be balanced off with how do we enable the teams to create their own processes that make sense for them, to classify the information, prioritize, triage, and categorize things together so that they're not just bombarded with a million different tickets all of the time.
Yeah, too many of those false positives can turn people off, and we all get all these too many messages, and it just becomes too much, and just like it's noise. But I think the other thing is it's a balancing act, and in that perfect world of them costing nothing, putting them everywhere. It'll be good to know you can always get that information when you need it. I'd like to probably go for the ability that you can turn them on anywhere if you need to. So you've got some foundations that it can be spun up when you need it. I'd like to think that we know the lineage of the data when it goes through. So I would like to think you don't need to add duplicate checks if you've already checked for certain things at certain stages. I'd also like to think that you can actually have different rules that live in different layers and actually serving different purposes. If you have some foundations, that this is where we can do our basic ones. This is where we'll do more advanced ones looking for degradation. But the key thing is getting business engagement. So that whole you don't know what you don't know, we don't know, but we can make as many assumptions as we want. But the business are the ones that are going to use it. The business ones are giving us the requirements, and the more we can get them to tell us where those rules are, and the business are also going to be the best people to probably influence that change or get that change prioritized to get it fixed to prevent it happening, because they're the ones that can say, look, they know their business well. They'd be able to do some analysis of what the potential cost would be to the product that they're putting a dependency on this being in place, what that would have for it. And I think it's better than coming from us data team saying you need to fix this quality because it's not right. But who are we to say it's not right? It's the business rules that define it. It's the business that need to make sure it's fixed. And in that perfect, I'm going to flip it around. In that perfect world, the data should be all fine before it gets to us. Everything's shifted left. We've got the perfect form capture as every single web application out there. Every app has got validation of the data that's allowed in there. Our APIs have got another layer of integrity. The database has got the right data types to make sure you can't put the wrong data types in there. That perfect world that I've never seen.
Yeah. And I mean, JT is over here saying false positives are results of poorly configured quality rules. I generally agree until you have so many rules that you can't manually manage them. I think this goes back to a couple examples that we've heard. I was speaking with a major US bank, let's leave it at that. And their data quality strategy is quite literally manually configure the rules on the data sets that matter to you. And they're now 3 years into this initiative, and they have 6,000 manually configured rules. They go off. Nobody knows who owns them. Nobody knows who manages them. Nobody knows how they were decided. And then they get turned off, and then some data fails, and they get turned back on, and they go in a circle. And so I think part of it is, yes, poorly configured rules are an issue, but there's also just that ability to scale that. There has to be a balance between everything is super bespoke and manual, and you need to start automating some things. And I think that's been a major challenge, where you know some rules about your business, but then you also have all of these things that you just want someone else to figure out, a system to figure out. And I think that's a big challenge for a lot of organizations.
I think it goes back to that use case we started with as well. Is like one rule might not be good enough for might be needed for one use case, but not for another. And you know, if again the owner of that data going, why is that person really happy with my data and this one not? It's because you know that one doesn't need the level of detail that the other one's got the issue with. So yeah, I'm big supporter of understanding what the rule is supporting, what use case it is, and only having what's needed based on the rules. If there's no business rule, you need to encourage people to put it on there, and sometimes that's with them seeing the bad data in its wild.
Yeah. And Chris, you also earlier mentioned lineage. You've talked about tracing rules and not applying rules downstream if you're already covering the upstream. I actually want to talk about this because a lot of part of a strategy for preventing bad data would be proactively monitoring data as it enters the system rather than downstream, closer to the dashboard, closer to the analytics tool. I can share a little bit about what I've seen, but I'd love to hear what you've seen in the wild as well, where the way that I think about it is data doesn't start at the modern data stack. It doesn't start at the warehouse. Data actually starts at the application. And monitoring the data from as close to the application, as close to the source, is probably going to be much more beneficial than waiting until it goes all the way multiple hops down and then back tracing it back multiple hops. We talk a lot with teams that have, say, well, I have a transactional system here, Oracle, SQL Server, Postgres, MySQL, whatever it is. And then that has a bunch of views and a bunch of stored procedures. And then that eventually replicates its way over to a Snowflake. And then that gets transformed a million times over. But we're monitoring all the way downstream, and data problem happens. Where is it coming from? And that's been a big problem. Something that we at Bigeye try to say is data is data. Any database is a database. So you should be monitoring anything that read-only replicas. Don't put like excessive load on your production systems, but as close to the source as possible. That's how we think about it. And then make sure you can trace that forward and trace it backwards as necessary. What's been your experience with this?
So yeah, I really fully support, and I've had rants on this and in many times over the years on LinkedIn of that shift left approach. I used the term earlier, data firewall. And the data firewall should be implemented as close as possible to the creation of that data. And I think the positive impacts that happen now is the data engineering world and the software engineering world are much closer. You know, there's a clear understanding that the deployment changes happening in the operational systems will affect downstream systems now, and it's now impact assessed rather than, oh damn, we broke the BI reports again. Oh, quickly, let's go and make the team work over the weekend to fix it because we've got to engage with them. I think those days we've moved away from, and I think that's great. Having those having those quality rules as close as possible is the ideal. Where you can't, having them use the term ingest. I was talking about the different levels of monitoring that I believe in. I won't go into them for the 6 of them now, but I think 2 of them is that point of ingest, and there's a point where it may be good enough for ingest. For example, you have how many sites you have in your organization or entities that form part of it. or clients or vendors. And the only rules you can check at the time is it a number? Does it map the format of that account number? Yes, it does. You can't test that it's the granularity of it's now at the same amount. Hold on, how can I go from 200 distinct values yesterday to having 4,000 today? That's not right. In fact, all the reports are going to be totally off because it's got too many data points on there now. Something clearly is not right. But you can't detect that until the data has been landed, and you can't check that at an ingest, and then you have master data capturing every key value that's there and checking it with some integrity checks. But that could be because you have a very complex environment with many systems all feeding into an integration layer of some sort. So yeah, so understanding what rules you can put in place, which will prevent poor quality data from a row by row checking, is best practice at that point. I think understanding, especially where you have algorithms and things that are being used off it, or it's being used for some standard rules that should never be broken, to really have that fail safe, because getting that caught on that first night of the batch or stream or overnight process or whatever you have before it pollutes everything. And we used the word trust earlier, and yeah, it's all about the business trusting what you're doing for them. And sometimes it's not your fault, but unfortunately the data team is where they get their data from, and we're the custodians of it as far as they're concerned. And we're only as good as the last insight we provided. And if we're able to prevent that, we'll keep the credibility, we'll keep the trust. But it's knowing where that makes sense and where it doesn't. And I think having that business engagement, understand the consequences of these things, learning over time, maybe using some advice from some people that have got the battle scars of what they've seen in the past to look for your business. These are sort of things you'd look for. So yeah, I fully support pushing it left, but you need to educate and find the stuff. So it's always going to be that collaborative feedback loop, and the quicker you can speed up that feedback loop from alert to fix to resolution, is going to be an indication of how performant your organization is, or your data team is in your organization.
And I want to give an extreme example of shift left, and this might be a controversial opinion.
We love controversial.
I love a controversial opinion. So shift, if we really think about shifting all the way left, it would be back to the developer of the application. Before the developer of the application writes any code, they have to specify the data model. They have to specify what the assumptions are for that data model. And then going back to data contracts, that realistically forms the data contract. If we look back 30, 40, 50 years ago, transactional databases were really the only thing available. And all transactional databases had built-in assumptions. You could declare primary foreign keys. You could declare uniqueness. You could declare nullity or null or not null. You can get even trickier in some of the Oracle and Microsoft let you get even trickier. You can write stored procedures to valid or triggers to check on insert whether something is valid or not. And a lot of businesses have been built on in database checking of data as it enters and then doing something proactively about it. But we have, as a engineering culture, have moved away from that in the spirit of moving faster, of building things faster, and then really we should now have done that and shifted all the data problems right to the data team, to the warehouse, to the lake, whatever that is. And now we have to do extra work after the fact of understanding the schema, defining it, validating the assumptions. And it is possible we could once again start shifting things left, but I have not met a single engineering team that actually wants to do this. And my hot take and my controversial opinion on this is there needs to be a balance. Engineers need to sacrifice a little bit of speed, a little bit of flexibility in order to work better with the data team, work better with the business.
And I've just been making some notes because you triggered some thoughts as I went through. My brain so I can't remember it all. But it's all about simplification, and I use this term a lot as well, which is reduction friction. So reduction friction is the time, complexity, and effort for performing an activity. And the reason why a lot of these app developers, and I said maybe because they're not using the best resources on it, maybe they're fixed price, they're not incentivized to do these things. But if you have like a metadata driven rules for data, because there's only a certain amount of different data types out there that you really need to put some put some structure on it. So, understanding a number needs to it's stored as a number. It needs to be afloat if it's going to take certain decimal places. These are basic things, but they should be given as rules that. And maybe this is where we aren't able to do it, is when we talk to the business, they're not able to understand the implications of giving us these requirements at that level. If there's a bit of a playbook, we're understanding at the point of capturing data is the playbook of what question you need to ask to determine what rules should be applied. And template approach, metadata driven approach, there's only a certain amount of capture information you capture for a customer. There's only a certain amount of information you capture for a product. There's only a certain amount of information you capture for a vendor or a credit card transaction. And a great example for the payment industry. So ISO 8583 has been around since the 80s. Mm-hmm. It's a contract for making a payment from an authorization, from a request for information, for a dispute, for every single event is defined and what's expected from that. Every industry, open banking has provided a lot of that. So, open banking is telling you what rules should be defined for these things. So I think more industry patterns that people subscribe to that provide that head start for anyone doing any forms for any information, saying, hey guys, look, this is what you can capture at the fore. This is what you can enforce at a database. We'll probably reduce 80% of these quality rules we're having. The challenge, the other one you mentioned, I've only solved half the problem there, which is the data integrity, foreign key, primary key constraints, master data management, validation of, again, these things, having reference data, understanding the difference between reference data and master data, these things will help. But we've got very complex systems that have been built over many, many years. I talk about another concept called the challenger era, which is, anyone starting fresh now has got a great head start on all the other organizations, because you could build something properly from the beginning and learn from all these mistakes we've made in the past. And, you could probably challenge some of the main players in this market now, because you'll have that competitive advantage. You will be able to move quicker.
Yeah. And
all because of bad data.
Yeah. And then George mentioned that quality of data is a byproduct of corporate data literacy. And that's exactly what you're talking about. It's that data literacy, that understanding of what does this data mean? Why is it used? Who's using it? And then this kind of like brings us full circle back to the world of data governance and data discovery and knowledge bases. So I think that is a necessary prerequisite to data quality, and really shifting left the data literacy part, enforcing this all the way from the application, all the way from the business. When the product manager writes a definition and says, this is what this feature is going to do, great. Well, what's all the data that we're capturing? What's important to us? And then translating that all the way down the chain.
Yeah,
I think
I totally agree. And that literally, I like to use the term enablement as well. Depending on which audience and which ones likes it a little bit more. Some people get a little bit offended if it's literacy. I think it's teach to suck eggs, but it is that education with him. Enabling people to understand the impact of their actions or lack of actions.
And I think that holding application team software engineers more accountable for, you made a change and you didn't communicate it, and now a report's delayed to the CFO, not the analyst's fault anymore. That's
and I'm a big keen keen supporter of praising people when they're doing a good job, and giving. And I think that helps that community aspect. But it goes both ways. For example, you've got your nice chart up there that's at the board pack. This was presented by the individuals that created this data. They're going to feel they own that data, the quality of that data, and be proud of it. In the same way, the team that has error coming up, data type format issue, is, who's responsible for that quadrant?
When I was on the data warehouse team at Uber, we had an internal chart called the Opportunity Champions leaderboard, and Opportunity Champions were, for us, it was actually which queries took the most compute. Now, probably apply this to data as equality as well, but it's bringing that visibility to say, look, we have 1,500 consumers of this data, and here's who's creating the most load. And if you want to ask why your query is not running as fast as it should be, go talk to them instead and help them fix their query. And actually, that created an interesting virtuous cycle where internally analysts and data scientists would start working together, and they'd say, hey, you're running this query. I know what you're trying to do. There's a faster way to do this. Let me help you out. And then warehouse performance got better. I think we could do the same for data quality if you create that virtuous cycle of, hey, this team is getting it right, and this team is struggling a little bit, and we're going to just surface that information, and the two of you can figure out how to resolve the problem.
Gamify it. I know how I get motivated. It's all about gamification. But you see, even LinkedIn now, it's gamifying people, creating articles for them, so you get a little badge. Well, that's how. By the way, that's how I got my one. I just had to enter some comments on some generative AI article, and then you get a sticker. So I haven't done any more. I'm not giving away all my information. I got one badge. It was easy enough.
Love it. I know we got about 9 minutes left. I know I did promise in the comments at one point that we would tell our own horror stories since it is Halloween, spooky data stories. Chris, do you have any? I have one top of mind, but
well, you go first. I used my one with the I used one of mine with the one earlier with the e-commerce one. I've got another one. I'll let you go first.
I can definitely do spooky data stories. So mine is at Uber. We obviously ingested all the driver logs, like how many trips are drivers taking, when do they go online, offline, so on and so forth. And that would get reconciled weekly. And then at the end of the week, there would be reporting done around by city, by state, by country. And the most monitoring we had was simply, did the pipeline run? If the Kafka, if the data got ingested from, I think back then was Postgres, and at some point it was Kafka, if that landed in the warehouse, we were all happy. The pipeline was green. Data engineering team said, great, we're moving on. And at some point it was Sunday night, and which means it's already Monday in Europe, and the Paris team woke up, and Paris team said, hey, we're just missing like a solid 10% of the data that for our reporting, like just gut check, the numbers look wrong. And that was a very, very, very long night for the data team trying to figure it out. Apparently we were not syncing all the partitions over, and so we were just kind of dropping stuff on the ground, and learned that the hard way. And from there on, we improved our data quality checks. We improved how we're monitoring all this stuff. But the Sunday night message of, hey, something's wrong and I need this report by end of day is never a fun one.
So I've got one which is quite apt this particular week, because anyone's diaries that deal with US and UK recurring meetings, they will probably all clash this week because the clocks went forward. Clocks fell back, fall back in list on Sunday. I think US it goes on this weekend. So this week there's a 1 hour difference between the normal difference between the time zones. Working for organisation that was a global organisation that had to take records of information that happened in multiple countries, and different countries obviously displaying when the occurrence happened, but using their own particular time zone. But obviously we wanted to know understanding what that was across all the time zones, but seeing that each of them didn't actually capture the time zone, and it was all set in the local current at the local time, you didn't actually understand when one business day started, the next business day started. So yeah, so knowing your right data types and understanding the usage of the data, because in that example, it solved the unique requirement for each individual country. But if you're looking at it on a global level, you wouldn't be able to say which day it referred to unless you did a lot of reverse engineering based on and maybe went in that country at that time. So yes, it was interesting.
I definitely want to hear from the audience if the audience has any spooky data stories. But Chris, as soon as you mentioned daylight savings, my like heart dropped because it was the bane of my existence. Like global time zones. Here is the biggest tip I have. If you're not storing your timestamps in UTC, you are probably going to have a bad time at some.
Yeah, very good tip. Exactly it. And if you do your research on time zone, there's some funny ones out there where some countries don't change theirs. I think it's actually one pair where in America that they don't. I think they don't observe it, but it's actually just in the. Not even the whole county. I think it's or state, should I say? It's a reserve on there. It doesn't follow it. So
yeah, there's even within the United States, India has 30-minute offset time zones. So that's also fun. Yeah. Also to your point, Chris, I saw a message on LinkedIn, a post on LinkedIn that said, "Get ready, we're changing time zones." I'm like, no, that's next weekend. And then I realized, oh no, half the world changes time a different weekend, and that makes things even worse.
It does. Yeah, I had many clashes this week from in fact, because I do the show on Monday as well, and it was like, what time is it? Is it we're going with 5 p.m. is UK time this time? Is it 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time? Because it's normally 5. Sorry, normally 12. So yeah, but it's all fun and games.
Yeah. Pauline is calling this out. Parts of Indiana don't observe daylight savings, and the entire state of New Mexico. I also think Arizona is also special because I know someone in Arizona. So yeah, even within the United States, we can't decide what we're gonna do about it. But awesome. We're running up on time. I want to really thank everyone for joining. Thank you to everyone in the audience for participating. This has been a great discussion. Also, Chris, obviously, major thank you for getting on the call. I had a great chat. I loved reminiscing.
It was a good chat, and yeah. So as I was saying just before you go, I like these ones where jump on a show, no problem. We're 10 minutes before, we had a little pre-chat, and I think it went all right. So it's good having these natural discussions rather than a pre-described presentation. So it's always more fun. Always enjoy them.
Definitely, and you heard it here first, everyone. We do not prep. Chris and I chatted for 10 minutes ahead of time, and that's it. That's all the prep we did for the show. This is what we aim to do. We want to have a little bit more of a natural conversation. So I'm glad you appreciated the format, Chris. I definitely enjoyed it.
All good.
So as I mentioned, we'll be sending out a lot of the numbers that we talked about, a lot of the material quotes that we send out via email. We're going to have these live streams on an ongoing basis, so please join in for more fun data chats. You can follow us, Bigeye, on LinkedIn for any future contents and events. And obviously, if you want to learn more about data observability and how Bigeye approaches it, let us know. Go to bigeye.com. You can sign up for a demo or message me directly on LinkedIn. Egor Krasnov, you will find me. And I would be happy to take a call. So with that, thank you, Chris. Thank you, everyone, for dialing in, and happy Halloween, everyone.
Happy Halloween. Thanks for having me, Egor.
Yeah, thanks. Bye.